know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
We are a hockey podcast here on the Chris Johnston Show, a show that we do on Mondays and Thursdays. But if you haven't caught on with both of us, we are both baseball fans. Notably, CJ, big Toronto Blue Jays fan. So I have no doubt that you saw Aaron Judge hit home run number 61 against your beloved Blue Jays. And I have no doubt that you also saw the now famed Frankie Lasagna drop number 61 in the stands. Ugh!
I took no joy in any of that. First of all, having Judge break the record at Rogers Center, I was really hoping the Jays would sneak out of that series without giving up that 61st homer. But if there was maybe going to be a little bit of a positive lining to it, maybe, you know, some lucky Torontonian or fellow Jays fan could have caught the ball, cashed in on it, and at least made some dough. And you can see there's Frankie Lasagna, but there's a couple other people right in that section that at least could dream about catching the ball. And they missed out, man. They missed out. That was tough to watch, quite honestly. I mean, the fact that one fan gave an interview to the Canadian Press, actually to Greg Strong, a former colleague of mine, and then another declined to give an interview. I think it tells you everything you need to know about in that moment how disappointing that must have been. So, you know, great moment. Obviously, tip your cap to Aaron Judge's season, but a kind of heartbreaking thing to have play out on our TV sets and watch that.
Ultimately, I thought the name Frankie Lasagna was a fake name. Because I don't know why you would ever want to put your name on like, it's one thing everyone sees the video of you like missing out on that ball. I wouldn't blame a guy if he didn't want to put his name on it and give some fake pseudonym to some website or whatever, just so that way no one really knows who his name is. But the guy's name genuinely is Frank Lasagna, and he has a restaurant and everything.
Well, have we verified that's really the name?
Well,
I hate to cast any aspersions. I'm sorry, sir, if that is your name, but I'm just saying something inside me when I hear that, it's like, wait a minute, is this real? I'd almost want to see ID if I was interviewing someone on that story.
So Scott Brown, who's the sports editor at the Canadian Press right now, we were tweeting back and forth about this, and he sent me a link to the restaurant that Frankie Lasagna works for. And if you see in their about page, it says, hi. Well, it starts off one of the first lines. It's like, hi, my name is Frankie Lasagna. I'm trying to find the name of said restaurant. I honestly forget the name of it, which I guess is not really good promo for them, but we're not really in the business of doing promo for people who don't pay us, if you get what I'm saying. All that to say, it seems as if Frankie Lasagna is a real name, but his shame is very real. Just the idea that you have an opportunity to get, like, at worst, $2 million, and you drop it. It goes off your glove, and you miss it. Like, is...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, man.
Oh?
What's up? I got some news.
Wait, whoa. This doesn't I mean, it's happened like a few times where we see stuff that kind of goes through. What'd you see? What's going on?
Rasmus Sandin is finalizing a 2-year deal with the Leafs.
Okay. Are you breaking news like live right now?
Oh, 2-year deal for Sandin. Hang on. Sorry, I got a tweet. This is not going to make good.
So I've said this on so many times before, where I do not like feel any way about CJ on the podcast when he's like looking up and looking down at his phone, because there's a good chance that he's like trying to like break news or try and make something happen. That day has finally happened where CJ is breaking news on his own podcast. And okay, Rasmus Sandin, we've mentioned him on the podcast before. It looks as if he is signing a 2-year deal. Is that all we know right now?
1.4 million is the AAV on the contract.
Okay.
Hang on, I just got to tweet this.
Okay, so by the time, I mean, that's still pretty cool that we were able to print this as we were recording. That's very convenient. This is really cool. Just to see like so basically for people who are watching on YouTube or not watching on YouTube right now, like CJ is literally just like on his phone in full on tunnel vision, tweeting out or at least writing about this story, or just letting everybody know Rasmus Sandin has signed a 2-year deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, kind of convenient, funny enough, considering the game they played Wednesday night against the Canadiens, where 2 of their defensemen end up going out due to injury, Carl Dahlstrom and Jordy Ben. So I wonder how much that had to do with getting Rasmus Sandin's deal done. And I guess you could answer that when you're able to look up. But this is pretty cool. This is pretty cool.
You're seeing how the sausage is made for anyone.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a couple interesting things to unpack here.
Okay.
But, the good thing for Sandin is, well, first of all, it sounds to me, and this is just some initial reporting being done.
Sure. Yeah.
That, oh man, my phone's going nuts.
Are you okay? Do you need a break?
All right. I need a breath. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. I wish I had a chocolate bar here to chill out with.
Okay. I wish you had one too at this point.
Man, but
you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. It's like I didn't plan on this happening during the podcast.
No,
But,
no one did. I didn't write this in my notes at all. I mean, you have to be prepared for the unexpected, essentially. So, yeah, just as best as you can, give us everything you know about the Rasmus Sandin situation.
So I think that the injuries on the Leafs blue line here actually helped in this case. It sounds like Rasmus Sandin, rather than seeing a bunch of his teammates out injured and thinking, hey, this is a chance for more leverage in negotiations, decided he wanted to be part of the solution rather than the problem. And so it's my understanding that ironically, when you would think, with Timothy Liljegren going to miss a few weeks of the regular season, both Jordy Ben and Carl Dahlstrom left Wednesday's preseason game against Montreal injured. Jake Muzzin hasn't yet been a full participant in camp with a back issue. That it was at that point, Sandin, I think, decided that there was no sense in extending this any further. It's my understanding he'll fly to Toronto on Friday and rejoin the Leafs or join training camp, I suppose, for Friday by the end of the week for training camp. And so, it's sort of interesting. You'd think that would play into his favor. And I think ultimately it led to him, signing a deal. So, for the Leafs, this is good news because they are down a bunch of Ds.
Mm-hmm.
And my apologies.
All good. Do what you need to do. Again, if this was like radio, we'd have to do the whole, remind every few minutes what's going on, but we might as well just do it anyway for those who, no, not that people would be tapping in right now, but this is still really cool that you're able to break this news of Rasmus Sandin signing. This is really awesome.
Yeah, they're seeing my distracted brain, toggling between my texts and
you're on this. Like, this isn't like a press release. Like, this is your info.
Yeah. Actually, the Leafs are just releasing it right now. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. This is really like an in-depth look of like how it is for like an insider, like breaking a story and then trying to get out a little in front of the team. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. So, this is good for Sandin. He's a 22-year-old defenseman. He missed 8 days of training camp. And I think everyone recognized it had to end. I'm told there's actually a meeting face-to-face earlier in the week with the Leafs front office and Sandin's agent, which I think helped get things going in a positive direction. But ultimately, the player himself saw the situation back in Toronto, saw the fact that the team is losing players. And I think, look, we've talked about this throughout with a number of the RFAs. I mean, really, on your second contract, you don't have much choice. And so, the high line item here is he takes a deal at $1.4 million over 2 years that he could have signed probably 3 months ago. What changed, of course, is the circumstances, and I think missing that time. And it's actually critical for the Leafs because they're going to start the year with Timothy Liljegren's salary on long-term injured reserve. It's $1.4 million. So that matches up perfectly in terms of the Leafs at least being able to start the season cap compliant. I would think at some point, if they do get fully healthy, which is always an if with NHL teams, it's always risky to say, hey, when they get fully healthy, because some years no team gets fully, or a team doesn't get fully healthy, but they might have to make a trade to make the numbers work. But it looks to me, at least in this initial instance, that that Sandin is going to basically help the team fit all the pieces together to start camp. Or to start the season. I don't think they'll have to make a move there, and we'll go from there. And so, he's going to be in Toronto on the weekend. I'm sure he'll address some of this himself. Maybe Kyle Dubas will speak to reporters, and then, what's important for the Leafs is to get him back on the ice, because I think he's going to be an important contributor for them this season.
Thank you for answering that question with the salary cap, because that was going to be my follow-up question. And funny enough, like in my notes, I was going to ask, because of all those injuries on the blue line, what that would mean for Sandin, but also Dahlstrom and Ben's injuries and Liljegren and Muzzin. They are also on top of the fact that John Tavares is also out for the next 3 weeks with an oblique injury. We're going to get to that a little later on in the show today. We're going to get to some news about some estimates of the salary cap going up in the next few years. We also have to get to sports interaction with David Bastl, which we'll get to it in a few moments. I feel as if, like, Siege, I know you like the good coffee. I think you might have to get yourself some good wine for a bit.
It's a little early in the morning for that. We do record in the morning, as our loyal listeners know, but
it doesn't stop you from being at Arrow at 9 o'clock in the morning.
No.
Oh man. Okay, so we have that news out there. We still have other stuff we're going to get to on this edition of the CJ Show. You know what we're going to do, actually? We're going to bring in David Bastl from Sports Interaction. We'll get to that segment, and on the other side, we're going to get to some more fun stuff on the CJ Show. With DB and Sports Interaction, as always, 19 and over, we ask that you play responsibly. There is a link to responsible gaming strategies in the description of the show. It's time to play the You Can Bet That intro. Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastl. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. DB, let's get into the Hart Trophy discussion. Connor McDavid, according to Sports Interaction, looking like the favorite. Austin Matthews in second. Leon Draisaitl at 9.26. You can get into more of the odds as we go through this, but third place according to you guys.
See, that's a tough one. It's you know what's really funny, when I'm researching this and I'm looking through everything, CJ, and I see Connor McDavid only has 2 Hart trophies beside his name. I'm like, really? And then you kind of look at it and you go, oh yeah, that's right. The Taylor Hall year and the Patrick Kane year and the Leon Draisaitl year, the Kucherov year, and it's like maybe he's due for his third, but the odds aren't really there. So I kind of look off the board a little bit, and maybe it's maybe a Cal McCarr or something of that nature, but I don't know about you guys, but what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I think we probably could have given it to Connor McDavid every year he's been in the league. Maybe other than his first season, of course, when he missed half the season with an injury. But other than that, if he had won it any of those other years, would anyone have complained or said it was a terrible choice? Maybe there's some Gretzky-like fatigue there. I don't know, but
Makes sense. Yes.
It would be hard to. Entering a season, it's just hard to construct someone else winning. I mean, I guess if you're looking for value in a bet, maybe, but to me, I would think he's going to be the favorite.
Never get tired of Connor McDavid, who, by the way, I should mention, again, the favorite, according to Sports Interaction, to win the Hart Trophy at 3.61. Austin Matthews, who I mentioned in the discussion, second at 5.44. I also want to get to the President's Trophy odds as well.
Sure.
The Colorado Avalanche look like the favorites there at 3.66.
Yeah, no real surprise there. Defending Stanley Cup champions are usually in that 1-2 spot overall kind of thing. It's funny. It's nobody ever wants to win this trophy just because of the curse and so forth. We saw it last year again with the Florida Panthers and their big outs in the second round of the postseason and so forth. But you know what? If you're looking at value, I'm circling the Carolina Hurricanes at about 12-1. A lot of nice additions. Maybe they put together a nice regular season. Hopefully they could parlay that into a postseason, CJ, but that would be my pick right now. A little off the board, but still close to the top.
Gonna be man, it's hard to pick these preseason ones. Like, I can't even get my mind around the fact we're gonna have a season now. So What do you think, Julian? Where's your money at?
In my pocket. No, I'm kidding. I like the idea of, Colorado Avalanche would make sense to me. The Leafs are second on that list at 6.20. Florida Panthers, hey, they won it last year. Maybe they could win it again. They are third at 9.09. I like the Carolina approach, though. I think they're still a good regular season team. They're still a team expected to make the playoffs. Maybe they have a slightly better year. Maybe the Rangers. I'm not sure where the Rangers are on that list as well,
bad,
but I'm pretty high on the Rangers. I'm pretty high on the Rangers this year.
21-1. Yeah.
We need to calculate who's incentivized to put the pedal down in the regular season too. Sometimes those veteran teams that have had long playoff runs maybe save a little extra for the playoffs. So, that's where I'd be looking at anyway.
Yeah.
So
true.
Good point.
Yep.
Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. DB, we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good, guys.
What's funny about this episode, Siege, is that I did have, I know I mentioned it off top, but I do have a section planned out with just a bunch of Leaf stuff because we're still kind of in the quiet days of the preseason and all that. And teams are still trying to figure themselves out. But it seems as if the bigger stories right now are coming out with the Leafs. And that was before the wildness of the Rasmus Sandin trade being broken down. I thought the big thing would be talking about how John Tavares, his oblique injury, would affect the Maple Leafs for the next few weeks. And I still think we should still discuss that on the CJ show today.
Yeah, I feel like I need to apologize to the viewers and listeners that whole first segment that you can bet that segment was a bit of a mess. Well, because I usually try to give you my full attention, but in this case, my phone is just like,
it's okay.
But look I guess sometimes people want to know how the sausage is made. Sometimes that's what it is, right? You could be out at the grocery store. You could be chilling at Starbucks. You could be in line to go to a movie, and all of a sudden something goes down, and you're trying to push out as much information as you can.
Did I ever ask you where's the weirdest place you've broken a story? I feel like I did, but I don't remember.
Honestly, in this moment, I can't even really give you a good answer. I don't have one obvious candidate, but it's because, literally the job is 24/7. It's an awesome job. I'm not complaining, but you're doing it everywhere all the time, no matter where you are, to varying degrees. And just in terms of being in contact with people and figuring out what's going on around the league. There's a lot of teams. There's a lot going on. So I can't think right now. Maybe the weirdest place I've broken a trade is on this podcast with you, trying to work my way through a segment where you're asking me questions and I literally don't know if I'm hearing anything. I'm just staring at the wall.
So, okay, I was going to approach it another way. I was just going to mention a bunch of random places, and you could just tell me if you've broken a trade there or not.
Probably a bathroom at some point.
I was about the
that's
toilet was the very first place.
I don't even know if that's weird, though.
You don't think it's weird to just, you're sitting on the toilet and your phone comes out? It's like, oh, crap, this guy signed.
Well, I just think, doesn't everyone, we don't need to get into this, but doesn't everyone
need to get into toilet humor? Yes.
It's on their phone in that position at times.
So you don't think it's weird about breaking news on the toilet, is what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. We're all connected everywhere nowadays, man. No one really wants to think about this.
As long as you cleared your phone after the fact or wash your hands at the very least.
Where are we going? Your job is to keep us out of the ditch, Julian. And I feel I feel like you've got your hands on the wheel and you're turning hard right.
No. I purposefully wanted us to drive into this ravine, CJ. This was fun because look, we need to I need more material at this point. But I when you brought up the idea about just bringing up stories, I had to make my mind go that way. So not the bathroom. You know what? We won't even need to bring up more weird places. Just talk to me about John Tavares and the fact that he's out for the next 3 weeks with an oblique injury, and what the heck the Leafs are supposed to do with that.
Well, I think they're okay. Look, if there's one thing, the Leafs are a pretty deep team at forward. No team wants to have the amount of injuries the Leafs seem to have had in the early days of camp, although they're certainly not the only one. Players push themselves to a different level as soon as they get in this first week of camp, and groin issues pop up and back issues pop up for older players. I'm certainly not painting this as good news for the Leafs, but I also don't think it's a crisis point. Between Alex Kerfoot, who's filled in a pinch, including in that playoff series with Montreal, and actually had a strong series when Tavares was injured as a second line center. Toronto's also added Calle Jarnkrok in the offseason. And he's someone I think that the organization is comfortable using in a top six role when needed. Probably if they get to a point where everyone's healthy, he's more of a third liner on the team. And so, I think that they'll be okay in the short term. And at least the initial prognosis on Tavares is that it's about a 3-week injury, which takes you into the first week of training of regular season. But, I don't think it's necessarily a long-term issue. It's unfortunate for him though. I mean, last off season, meaning the one prior to the 2021-22 season, he was after that hit from Montreal. I think his summer wasn't quite normal. Obviously after that, he was really optimistic about having a full summer and feeling on top of his game, entering this camp. And now that'll be disrupted. But, this is unfortunately part of what goes on in the league. I think as you get older, it's, you see it with players. And so I don't see that as being as big of an issue for the Leafs as maybe their questions on the blue line. But, the Sandin signing does help there because it will give them another option, another experienced body to play in their top six, because it looks like they're going to have a few guys sidelined when it comes to the start of the season at that position.
Oh, by the way, off that game yesterday against the Canadiens, where it got to a point where Ben and Dahlstrom were injured, and the Leafs had to put in a Calle Jarnkrok and an Alex Kerfoot on defense. Can you just describe what that was like watching that, seeing two forwards be put into defensive duty?
I was at the game, and I mean, it was other than trying to watch Slafkovsky a little bit, although it was a pretty sleepy night for the Canadians in that game, so there wasn't a lot to watch. It was very interesting. What's surprising, and look, it's an exhibition game. I'm not sure what it means, but they both filled in pretty well. I thought, maybe a couple moments where they got lost, but given that neither player, neither Calle Jarnkrok or Alex Kerfoot had played defense prior in their career, even as kids, that it was not a position they played. I thought they handled it pretty well. They were making some breakout passes. Probably helps when you're playing with TJ Brody as Kerfoot was, and Morgan Riley as Jarnkrok was. Two of the Leafs' best defensemen to help them get through that. But it was a strange circumstance. But those two injuries happened basically early in the second period. Both they lost two defensemen. I think Sheldon Keefe was looking at his bench and not wanting to overtax the four healthy defensemen he had. And so it was a little bit strange, but exhibition games, you don't always have something to focus on. That was kind of one of the interesting points, and the Leafs managed to actually put up a shutout somehow. So, if you're the Canadians, you're probably feeling, I saw Mike Johnson from TSN put out a tweet about, if you're a Canadians player, you're like, wow, we had, 2 periods against forwards playing D, and that's how little we got done. Maybe a little regret there from their end of the ledger.
I can imagine that. It's not like, the Canadians at the end of the day, they went through that. It's not like they lost a Zamboni driver or something in net. There are worse ways to lose games. And that was not an intentional dig. It just, sorry, that kind of came out. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean it like that. Sorry.
I know we've been on it about it in our last show, Julian, but these exhibition games, some of them are tough to watch. Let's just call it what it is. Some teams are playing 8 exhibition games. You're getting mishmashes of rosters. We're all sort of getting through this. Not to trivialize the process. I do think, there's certain aspects where players are trying to prove themselves and get the attention of management and the coaching staff. They can do that in practice, but I think doing it in the game helps too. But we're not going to remember much about these exhibition games. Maybe I'll remember watching 2 forwards play D. That might be one thing that stands out. But generally, I've been to a number in my career, and I can't tell you too much about what happened in them.
So on that note, even if for preseason games as a whole, you're not going to remember much of them, there's still people fighting for roster spots, whether they're young prospects or people on PTOs. I was just curious, whether just in Toronto or just around the league, are there any PTOs or other young players in roster battles that you're keeping an eye out for?
Well, there's tons of intriguing names actually on PTOs this season. I mean, you got Eric Stahl in Florida. James Neal is on one in Columbus. We're talking about pretty accomplished players have, done a lot of things in this league, still trying to carve out a role. One guy in Toronto, Zach Aston-Reese, I fully expect him to get a contract. He's not just in camp. Sometimes there's two things here, and people might not realize this. You have to play 8 players in every preseason game that are deemed veterans. And there's a whole list of criteria that satisfies that. But, in simple form, players that have played a lot in the league, count that way. And so sometimes teams bring in PTOs, quite honestly, I think just to be able to help them meet the veteran requirement in these games. And in certain cases, the players don't really have what I'd call a real legitimate chance to make the team. At the other end of the spectrum is someone like Zach Aston-Reese in Toronto, who I fully expect to sign with the Leafs once they get their LTIR pool set at the start of the year. He's someone that they talked to all throughout the summer and turned out that there was a fit there. But, I don't really think he's trying out for anything. I think he's on the team, and it's just a matter of working out the contractual and salary cap ramifications of his spot. A couple guys there in your town I'm interested in. I think Sonny Milano is facing a bit of an uphill battle with the Flames. I mean, it's a deep forward group. He's kind of been a player. If you look at his career, has been an in-betweener. I know he had a really good year playing with Trevor Zegras last year in Anaheim, but back to his days in Columbus was almost too good for the AHL, but sometimes had trouble establishing himself at the NHL level. We'll see what happens with injuries and things too. I mean, that's the other aspect of this. If a player or two goes down, it could open the door for someone like a Milano. But I sort of have my eye on the veteran players. I don't know if you saw on Wednesday, but Alex Galchenyuk was let go from Colorado camp. I heard he suffered a minor injury maybe, and that might have led to him being let go or cut loose or whatever terminology would be correct for the tryouts. But the truth is there's maybe 30 players on PTOs right now around the league. I'd only expect maybe 5 to earn jobs. Jake Virtanen's in Edmonton. It doesn't seem like that's trending towards him getting a contract. Maybe someone like Alex Chiasson, who's actually earned a contract, I think 3 times as a PTO. He's in Arizona, and that's a team that can probably use a veteran player. And so I guess they're not all created equal. Those are some of the ones I have an eye on. And, I'm curious, frankly, to see what happens with Eric Stahl, just because, he ended up not playing any NHL games last year. He was, played for Team Canada at the Olympics and was the captain of the team, but didn't get an NHL job. And now he's trying out for that team alongside his brother, Mark, who's down in Florida now. And so I think that would be kind of a cool story. I've always had a lot of time for Eric and the Stahl family. And, I'm sure if he's playing for league minimum, maybe that he can help out a veteran team.
Yeah. What's funny? One name I was kind of hoping would end up on that PTO list would be Joe Thornton, because he was doing some skating with San Jose not too long ago, actually. He seems to be kind of hanging around the team. I kind of wished in my heart of hearts that like the Sharks were just giving him like one last run, or I don't know if he'll retire as a Shark or whatever, or if he just wants to get himself in game shape. But I was hoping that Joe Thornton would be one of those players on a PTO deal this offseason.
Yeah, and he's kept his plans pretty close to the vest. I have to think we've seen him play his last game in the NHL. That's sort of what my instinct tells me. But the fact you see him ripping around and still skating, I mean, maybe he hasn't come to that conclusion. There's always been a thought, Joe Thornton keeps close ties to Switzerland. He married a Swiss woman and spends a lot of time there, that maybe his final season would be played in Switzerland. You can remember he played for HC Davos actually during one of the COVID seasons. Anyway, he kept in shape and played some games over there. And so maybe we see him in Switzerland. Maybe he finds his way back. I don't have a sense of what his plans are. The Sharks have made it known that they're more than happy to have him around the team, to have him around their organization. And I'm sure there's almost whatever kind of job in that organization for him when he is ready to retire. But, it doesn't seem like it's in the cards for him to be a player there. And, I just think it's tough at his age to keep going. And, look, with Zdeno Chara retiring, with Jason Spezza retiring in the off season, maybe Joe Thornton. I mean, the next oldest skater in the league becomes Mark Giordano, who's 38 going on 39. You also have Craig Anderson, the goalie in Buffalo, who's 41. But, the truth is there's just not very many players that have a 4 at the start of their age that can play in the NHL these days. Even when you're as accomplished as Joe Thornton has been, he was a very productive player right into his late 30s, but each year gets a little tougher, and, he hasn't announced his intention, so I'm not going to retire him for him, but, it's hard to see him making his way back. I think at this stage, it's just a difficult thing to do. Not many guys, Joe Pavelski had the great year in Dallas last year. He's one of the oldest skaters in the league too this year. He'll be top 5. And, he was almost a point per game player. Pretty awesome to actually put in context the year he had last year for the Stars, given his age.
Here's another reason why I want to see Joe Thornton back in the league. As of right now, among active players, I believe none of them have played in the 20th century. Joe Thornton and Zdeno Chara, I think, was the last active player to have played in the 20th century up until he retired. And if Joe Thornton comes back, then he becomes the only active player to have played last century. That's a really interesting stat to me.
You mean the late 1900s?
Yeah, back in the days when they had big brick phones and the internet just became a thing.
Yeah, we didn't even have brick phones in the late, like they had them, but nobody really had them. Like I think I got my first cell phone in like 2002 or something.
Jeez. What phone was it?
I don't remember the brand, but it was just like a cheesy little flip phone. I think it was a Motorola. It certainly wasn't fancy, but it was a big deal to have a phone. I mean, for years I thought, like, why do you need a phone everywhere you are? It's almost it's a crazy notion now, but this is what happens. You don't always see what you need. And now basically we're carrying computers around in our pockets, and we're breaking news from these things and sending out stories and doing like all aspects of our job with one device. I mean, that whole idea would have been hard for 20-year-old CJ to imagine.
Thank you, technology, for being a great thing for all of us and just being reliable and amazing and not causing us any stress whatsoever. Thanks so much, technology. We really appreciate you.
Yes, social media has brought about some stresses, I must say.
Oh, yes. Yes, it has. There's actually one other thing I want to mention with PTOs. I think it's really interesting that you think that Sonny Milano has an uphill battle in Calgary as someone who is on the ground. Because I would have thought that because he was there, other prospects behind him seemed to be a bit more of an uphill battle. And I think Sonny Milano's actually looked okay. Like he's trying to put himself in like positions to score and stuff. And I don't think he scored in preseason yet, but he could be that ideal guy to fit on like a bottom 6 left wing spot. That really is like the spot that's available for the Calgary Flames. I was talking with his agent a couple of days ago. They were saying like a handful of teams were interested in him before the PTO signing kind of happened. And his focus really is just to try to make the Flames out of camp. But I don't know if he is the outright favorite for that job, but I feel as if considering that there are prospects like Jacob Pelletier available that the Flames could have easily tapped into, the fact that a guy like Sonny Milano is there, I think that makes it harder on other people. Also, Cody Eakin is also in camp as well, the Calgary Flames.
Right. And let me be clear. I don't think any decisions have been made because they don't need to be made yet. And the way a PTO works is he could, if he doesn't sign in Calgary, he could sign anywhere else at any given moment. I mean, you're truly a free agent still, but you have an agreement to try out at a certain team. You get certain protections from that if you get injured and the like. But there's not much in the way of commitment for any player on a PTO. I just think Calgary's, it's a tough forward group. It was a little surprising for me that Sonny Milano went through the summer and didn't sign somewhere for, something, but, players at sort of the middle to lower class of NHL players are getting squeezed now. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. And, maybe he would have thought he would get a job when he wasn't qualified in Anaheim a little easier and it didn't happen. Now he's got to go earn it the old fashioned way. And I'm not saying it's the door is closed from there, but I think it's going to be tough. The Flames have a lot of good forwards and they have limited cap space. Like a lot of teams, they have to manage that situation too. And we'll see where the chips fall, but certainly, probably some easier teams around the league. He could have went to earn a job, but give him credit. I mean, he wants to be somewhere where he can win, and Calgary looks like a good spot for that if he can get a contract.
I want to bring up two other stories before we get to stick taps to wrap up the show. And I wanted to get to them earlier in the week, but we have time to get to them now. But Ryan O'Reilly wanting a new deal in St. Louis doesn't seem as if he's that concerned about when that contract will come about, but I believe he will be an unrestricted free agent next summer. What are your thoughts on the Ryan O'Reilly dossier?
Well, the Blues in the past have made difficult decisions on players like Ryan O'Reilly. If you go way back, it was David Backes who left via free agency and was the captain and a longtime sort of key member of the team, and then Alex Pietrangelo never got a new deal and done in St. Louis and went on to Vegas. And, he was a captain who helped the team win a Stanley Cup. Ryan O'Reilly, that doesn't guarantee that they'll do the same with him. But I think, what it tells you about Doug Armstrong is that he's not afraid to make a tough decision on a player kind of at that iffy part of the career where if you're committing long-term and big money to, there's certainly some risk of, about the performance tailing off or injury risk, what have you. And so it'll be an interesting one to watch. I mean, this is also a summer where, Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas have signed, pretty big extensions with the Blues. And so you can see the next sort of generation popping through now and we'll see where everything lands with O'Reilly. I think that he'll be a player in pretty high demand if he ends up being a free agent next summer. And I think the fact that he's comfortable with where he's at is a good thing. I mean, he's earned good money during his career. He's had lots of success. And he's played on a few teams. So I think he understands if it's not St. Louis, that he'll probably find a good landing spot eventually, but it doesn't sound like there's any reason to expect anything happening imminently there. And ultimately we're in a hard cap system. Every team ends up making difficult choices as a result of that. And, maybe that's what the Blues will have to do when it comes time to make a final call on what they do with O'Reilly.
But hey, the salary cap is supposed to be going up at least by $1 million next year, and it looks as if it could be going up by a couple more $1 million if the estimates from the NHL are to be believed.
Yeah, it's basically locked in that next year will be $83.5 million. The players are still repaying the debt to the owners from the pandemic. Basically, the terms of that is if revenues are over a certain threshold, which the league should comfortably hit, that it just goes up by $1 million. So we're $82.5 million ceiling this season. Because the debt will still be being repaid, I would expect $83.5 million next year. And then it's the year beyond that where we expect a sizable jump to take place, tied to revenues again, which is, the way the old system worked before the pandemic turned everything upside down. And so, that looms as an interesting idea if you're, going to be signing a new deal. Austin Matthews will need a new deal in that context. A couple of years after that, it'll be Connor McDavid. Leon Draisaitl, lots of high-end players will be coming up for new contracts with that sort of being part of the thinking. And, should finally maybe open some things up around the league. It's been a difficult couple of years of transactions because you just have so many teams at the cap ceiling. I mean, it's basically half the league at this point is doing some sort of dance with the salary cap. I think that'll get a little bit easier when it gets a jump. And maybe it's only 3 years from now, you see $90 million cap and above. That's, I think some good days are on the horizon, Julian, is the best way to put it. I've been told we've seen, about 12 teams unveil sweater ads at this point with the patches on their sweaters. I'm told that the most expensive of those deals is somewhere around 10 million for a season. This year we're not going to have 32 teams, and some teams are doing partial ads, like the Montreal Canadiens. Have just ads on their home sweaters at this point. Other teams, I think, will maybe sell ads during the year, so it won't be full deals. But it's not hard to project down the line, say a year or two beyond this one, where all 32 teams have them. All those ads are sold for somewhere between $5 and $10 million a year. You're looking at a couple $100 million created out of thin air that goes to the hockey-related revenue, which benefits the players and owners equally. Will help pump the cap. You've got a 32nd team in Seattle. I think it's actually, we're getting to sort of an exciting time for the league that everyone had to sort of weather a storm financially for the last few seasons. But I think there's some excitement league wide that you're actually going to see the cap jump. Players are going to start earning more money. And of course that means owners are putting more money in their pockets too.
To quote J. Cole, my intuition is telling me that there are going to be better days. I love the fact that you mentioned the fact that we're going to see better days on on the other side of the other side of the horizon. I know you meant that in the context of the salary cap, but I like to think that works in the real world context as well. One last thing I want to mention too. The Anaheim Ducks say they will not discuss new deals with Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, and Troy Terry until the end of the season. That's 3 young players who are expected to be part of that Ducks nucleus for quite some time, and they're all super talented. Do you think it's a good idea that Pat Verbeek wants to wait until the end of the year to make a deal with those 3 players?
It's a bit of a calculated risk, right? I mean, if they have even greater seasons than they've had before, that it gives them sort of a wider range of players to include in the comparables when it comes time to make contract decisions or negotiations. You know, Pat Verbeek though is fairly new on the job there as a general manager, and not even a full year into his tenure. And so I think he's taking a bit of a wait and see approach with everyone in the organization, not wanting to jump into any decisions, feeling rushed by those sorts of timelines. And so yeah, maybe they end up paying them a little bit more as a result, but maybe he learns something and ends up trading one of them. I mean, I think it's hard to know at this point in time. The Ducks, I think, are getting on the right track with where they're headed, but it's been a few seasons of wandering around the abyss. And so sometimes you have to draw that line. I mean, the Leafs, for example, I think back kind of famously, they let Mitch Marner play at the third year of his entry level contract. He pops for 90 points or whatever it was, and has a better case in negotiations to get the deal he got. But sometimes players struggle in that platform year too. There's not one way it goes. And so, I would call that a calculated risk, and one where you really have a front office that's still getting to know its team and probably doesn't want to jump into any of those contracts circumstances without a full picture. It's a little easier, say, for Pierre Dorion to sign Tim Stützle a year out because he's been around the development of the kid. He knows the player. He's seen the way things are trending. I think that it's easier to do that when you've been in the job a few years, and Pat Verbeek, can't go back in time and be there when those guys were drafted. So, I would say that that's probably informs the approach, and, they'll be comfortable paying more money if they have to, because it'll mean those players are even better than what management thinks today.
All right. And with that, it's time for Stick Taps. It's the thing we do every Thursday where we show love to someone either in the hockey community or just anywhere, really. What's wild is that there are a lot of people, at least for me, who I think are deserving of Stick Taps of some sort. I was wondering what you were thinking for Stick Taps.
I wanted to actually, because I felt a little bad about hating on the exhibition games, both last episode and a bit earlier in this one. And I do want to give a stick tap to those players out there that have in recent days played maybe the only game they'll ever play in an NHL sweater, or even, guys that have had to crawl up from the ECHL and maybe put some time on the buses in the American Hockey League, and to get into one of those NHL games does matter. And so, I think that we should keep perspective that, okay, it's maybe not telling us which player is most ready to challenge for the scoring title or which team is going to be the best, watching these preseason games. But, we are talking about players that it's a pretty cool experience, I think, for some of those at the bottom of the lineup to get into those games. So I'm going to stick tap for everyone that has found this to be a milestone in their life, for their families, in their own hockey career, and recognizing that, for some guys, just getting in one game in this circumstance is an achievement and is gotten them to a place maybe that they didn't know if they would get to at certain points. So let's not just race past everything and dismiss it. And so I'm self-correcting here, Julian, and just giving it to anyone out there that has played a game in the last week or so and it was a big deal for them, because I do recognize it matters to some individuals, even if it doesn't matter to those of us commenting on it in the big picture.
Shout out to everyone getting that type of opportunity. And well said, Big Money Siege. So for me, I thought it was really cool seeing this big record being broken out of Hockey Eastern Ontario's U18 AAA League. Harry Nancy is a winger and a center. I think for a team called the Raiders, the Nepean Raiders. I hope I'm saying Nepean right. 6 goals, 2 assists, an 8-point effort, breaking the single game scoring and goal record of that league. So I just wanted to shout him out. We got a tweet before we started from Matthew Bauer, who I know he tweets at us a lot, and he's a big fan of the show. I believe today is his birthday. So happy birthday. And thank you so much for listening to our show. We really, really, really appreciate it. I think that's pretty much I guess there's a lot of people you could always like shout out, I guess, and all that. I know tomorrow is Friday, will be a Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I know Bob McKenzie's been tweeting out a very interesting series with regards to that and the connection to sports on TSN. So big up to Bob McKenzie for that, but also just take tomorrow to reflect about the horrible treatment towards Indigenous people in this country and what we can do to make things better in this country with our relations with Indigenous people. I think that's pretty much everything I want to shout out for Stick Taps on this segment.
Yeah, nice job. I like the picture of the 8-point game with the kid with all the pucks. That was pretty cool. He's got quite a stack to take home after that night. So kudos for that one, and well said on the Truth and Reconciliation Day.
Also, just not as serious as Truth and Reconciliation. Just give some thoughts to Frankie Lasagna today. This dude lost out on potentially $2 million, missing out on that Aaron Judge ball. Man, just glad that's not me. I'm glad that's not me. I wouldn't have been able to live that down. I swear to God. Oh my God. I'm still thinking about that guy.
I didn't tell you this, but I managed to snag some Blue Jays playoff tickets on Wednesday. And I actually, because honestly, the seats sold out so quickly. So the one of the games I got, I'm in the outfield section. So maybe I'll catch a home run ball in the playoffs. Won't be worth $2 million, but I'll be ready if I get my moment then.
If you got to catch that ball, because if you end up in a situation where you're trying to catch that ball and that just like, I don't know, goes off your glove and out, you're going to get memed to death.
Oh yeah. I mean, it'll be good for the content though. If that's what happens. I got tickets to a game in the division series. So I'm bullish on my Blue Jays. I'm hoping they get through the wild card round, and I actually have tickets to a game that I can go and attend.
Looking forward to watching playoff baseball. It's some of the best sports television you can watch if you're not going to be able to be in person, like me in this case, because Calgary is a long city away from Toronto. But enjoy the playoff tickets, and I hope everyone listening enjoyed this Thursday edition of the CJ Show. We broke a trade, we discussed other news and notes, and we discussed Frankie Lasagna. It doesn't get any better than this. No,
and I promised to bring more focus on Monday. That was a scatterbrain episode if there's ever been one. But anyway, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Julian, thanks for your patience, bud. No worries, dog. No worries, dog. I love you very much, man. It's all good. It's all good. Love you too, bud. All right, man. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode. If you're listening to this, get your questions in for Ask CJ. You can tweet us either at Reporter Chris or JKA McKenzie. Just use the hashtag Ask CJ when you write your question, and get on the Discord and write in your questions as well. For Siege, I'm Julian saying so long and peace. The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter at Reporter Chris. And follow Julian McKenzie at JK McKenzie. The Chris Johnston Show.